I spent an average of 22 hours per day alone in that cell. Now, this was obviously the worst experience that I'd ever had in my life, hands down. I went through every negative emotion that you could possibly imagine. Once I had my head wrapped around this, I started to adjust. And I started to consciously look for what opportunities might be found in that situation. I mean, after all, I had all day, every day to myself, right, to reflect. And after about 6 months of training, one day I just realized, wow, I am actually thriving in one of the most stressful environments in the world. In fact, I'm actually happier right here in a military prison than I had ever been in my entire life. So to me, this was kind of miraculous, and it gave me a tremendous amount of faith in this practice, and I decided I'm going to go all the way with this training. Since I was learning principally from monks, and everything that they had taught me was working up to that point, I decided I'm going to transform this military prison of mine into a monastery, my own training center for personal development. And so I spent the last 3 years of my time in confinement living and training exactly as a monk lives and trains. So as a result of this training, I discovered both the joy and the power of a life that's devoted to serving others. This led to the work I did for about 3 years, up until January of 2014. I co-founded and led the Gainesville chapter of Kids Kicking Cancer. Now in this program, it's very similar work where we're teaching mindfulness and other personal growth tools through the martial arts, but with a whole different population. We're working with just absolutely amazing young heroes like these guys. Now throughout this obviously kind of weird journey of mine, I learned a couple things, and I think the most important thing was I realized that the more focused I have become on how I can serve others, the happier I've become and the more success I've had. Now for me, this shift has been incredibly powerful. And as I saw the power of this in my own life and in the organizations that I was working with, eventually the question came to mind, I wonder what would happen if businesses operated in this way. It occurred to me, if business leaders put serving and caring for team members as a higher priority than quarterly profits or other short-term metrics, they would probably have much greater success over the long term. I wondered, are there any businesses that do this and prove that it works over the long term? And it turns out that there's an entire philosophy of leadership based on this idea of putting serving and caring for team members ahead of the numbers. And it's appropriately called servant leadership, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And there are numerous highly, highly successful organizations that prove just how effective servant leadership can be over the long term. My personal favorite example is this company called NextJump, based in New York City. This is a picture of Charlie Kim, who's the founder and CEO of the company. Now, Charlie and the other leaders at NextJump are always looking for ways that they can make the lives of their employees better. And they're building this entire culture of human beings who are focused on putting serving and caring for others ahead of their own personal ambition. Now then, at NextJump, they actually encourage their team members to go out and serve in the same way that they're being served. One way they do that is through this program called Code for a Cause. So at NextJump, they get some of the best computer programmers in the world, hands down. And they encourage these highly, highly talented people to spend at least 2 weeks every year going out to write code for any nonprofit that they want to help. And they are paid their full salary to go do this. These are people making well over 6 figures a year. Now, the results of the program are pretty fascinating. These people go out in teams of 3, and they oftentimes accomplish in 10 days what some of these nonprofits have been trying to do for years. So they come back to the office feeling like rock stars. They've learned real-world skills in a real-world setting, like building mobile applications, things they wouldn't learn at NextJump. And they're inspired to lift the people around them up and encourage them to continue to grow and become the best they can be so they can go out and serve in the same way. They have an award at NextJump called the Avenger Award. I think all of their awards are actually named after superheroes. It's appropriate. The Avenger Award is a $30,000 package. It includes a 3rd week of paid vacation. This award does not go to the top salesperson. It does not go to the top computer programmer. The award goes to the #1 peer-voted, most selfless, helpful person in the company. It goes to the best servant leader. Now, I was at the Avenger Awards ceremony in the summer of 2014 in July. 2013. And I got to see this young man named Gauri be announced as the winner. Kind of looks like he should win, doesn't he? This guy's a total sweetheart. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Now, you would think there might be some animosity, right? Some jealousy when someone is announced as the winner of a $30,000 package. Not at NextJump. There was 300 people in the room. And when I turned around, he was receiving a standing ovation. And I looked in the eyes of the people in the room, and I noticed that almost everyone had tears in their eyes because it was so inspiring. And the audience included his parents, who were flown in from India to see him receive this honor. Mom looks pretty proud there, doesn't she? That's how devoted NextJump is to building a culture of servant leadership. Now, what do you suppose happens when you build a culture like that? Well, a couple of things. One, you get team members who collaborate much better as teams. They work much better as teams. They think much more in terms of we instead of me. You also tend to get the best people in your industry, or in NextJump's case, some of the best people in the world working for you. They're fully engaged while they're on the clock, and they don't want to leave. In 2012, NextJump had almost 18,000 people apply for 35 open positions. That is a hire rate of 0.2%. To put that in perspective, the admission rate to Harvard University in 2012 was 6%. In other words, it was 30 times easier to get into Harvard than it was to get a job at NextJump. The people are so engaged that a couple years ago they asked if they could have a couple of bedrooms put in the office so that they could sleep over on nights when they're just so excited about their work. And at first Charlie said, "No way! People are going to think we're running a sweatshop if we have bedrooms in the office. Are you kidding me?" But the employees made a very good argument. They said, well, look, sometimes we're just so excited about the work that we're doing, and if we have to take the subway back and forth, we lose 2 hours of sleep. If we could just stay here, we'd get those 2 hours back. There's a shower in the locker room that we can use to clean up in the morning. There's free, healthy food for us to eat for breakfast. It'd be no problem. So now there are 2 bedrooms in the New York City office. Can you imagine a for-profit company where the employees are so engaged that they ask to have sleepovers in the office? Well, it's happening. And retention at NextJump is also incredible. So in the industry average, in the tech space, the industry average for turnover is about 20%. The year that I looked at it, it was actually 22%. So about 1 out of 5 people leave every year, which is very, very costly. Most HR professionals agree that every time you turn over a mid-level employee, it costs you about a year's salary. So if you think of, okay, the industry average is 20%, NextJump might be, 15, 10, no. The turnover at NextJump is less than 1%. And that is despite the fact that their employees routinely get phone calls from other companies in the tech space offering them 2 to 3 times what they make at NextJump. And most of the time, the employees don't even return the phone calls. So now I know I've mentioned some very big ways, that leaders are showing how much they care for their people, and it's in some cases it's involving nice perks and things. And I want to make it very clear that what this servant leadership really has nothing to do with the perks. In fact, there's a good amount of research that shows that companies with great perks oftentimes have no better engagement levels than those without them. What it really comes down to is doing little things every single day that prove to the people on our teams, whether they're a permanent member of the team, or I know many of you as planners work with temporary teams when you're planning an event, that show those people that we really truly care about them. If team members don't receive some type of genuine and sincere, specific appreciation once every 7 to 10 days, you can start to see a reduction in engagement. Now, where I think we can take this to a whole nother level and make it an art is when we're having that "how can I serve you" meeting, is we can ask somebody, how do you like to be appreciated? Ask somebody, if you were to do something that I just thought was fantastic and I really wanted to appreciate you, what would that look like within reason? And have somebody tell you. And the reason I think this is so important is, let's say, for instance, we have DJ Corey D up here who's chatting with the virtual world, spinning music for them, by the way, she's fantastic. But now let's say DJ Corey D, let's say she's an introvert, and I want to appreciate her, And I decide, well, I'm going to bring her up here on stage in front of 350 people that are in this room, and I'm going to show her a picture, and maybe I'll even have her give a talk. That would be punishment for an introvert, right? Maybe all she wants is a day off to go walk in the woods, or maybe she plays golf. Or maybe, at the risk of sounding egotistical, maybe she says, Matt, I would just like to have lunch with you and learn more about you, you know? One of my favorite examples of this, which I thought was so powerful, I have a friend named John Spence, who I think actually presented here last year, or maybe 2 years ago. But he's run several organizations, and I remember a story he told me about a young woman he had working on his team who was an executive assistant, who he thought was just fabulous. And he knew that her most important, the thing that she valued more than anything in her life was her family. So when he wanted to appreciate her, he did something I thought it's so easy but so powerful. He wrote a letter to her family, telling them what an awesome human being she is and what an incredible impact she's had for the organization. I could almost picture her crying as her husband read that letter aloud for her and her children. I'd like you to imagine just this hypothetical scenario that your primary purpose for coming to work is not to be a meeting planner or to run a meeting planning department or to run an AV company or to run an association, to run a sales department for a hotel chain. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. These are all great things, but I would like you to imagine that your primary purpose for coming to work is to build a team, starting with yourself, of awesome human beings with extremely high character who put serving and caring for others as their top priority in their life. Now that makes coming to work a pretty meaningful experience, doesn't it? Now deep down, I believe everyone in this room knows that this is what makes life rich, right? We know that when we put serving and caring for others as our top priority, that's what life is about. And I have some pretty good evidence that demonstrates this. Years ago, I read this really fascinating research on near-death experiences. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with a near-death experience, it's essentially when somebody's pronounced clinically dead by a medical professional. They remain dead for 1 minute, 5 minutes, sometimes 10 or 15 minutes or longer. And then they're later revived, and they can actually come back and talk about what it was like to be dead. Now, this research looked at hundreds of cases of near-death experiences from around the world, so there were many aspects of the experience that were reported as being different. But there was one aspect that was almost the same in just about every single case. It turns out that as these people were approaching the boundary between this world and whatever might lie beyond it, they were all asked a question. Now, where it got interesting to me was that it didn't matter what culture they came from, didn't matter how old they were, didn't matter what gender they were, didn't even matter what religious background they had. If they were Christian, it was Jesus asking them this question. If they were Muslim, it was Allah. If they were an agnostic or atheist, it was their own deepest inner self asking them this question. But in almost every single case, as these people approached the boundary between this world and whatever might lie beyond it, the question was the same. How well did you love? How well did you love? Now, the love we're talking about here is not a feeling. We don't have to like somebody to love them. Love is an action. It's a verb. When we actually love somebody, we extend ourselves to help them meet the legitimate needs that they have in their lives, and we treat them with kindness and compassion and respect, regardless of whether or not we like them. That is love. And to me, that is the essence of being a servant leader. So I'd like to ask a favor of you, and that is that you consider as a possibility making loving well or serving and caring for team members better the top priority in your life. There is no doubt that this will help you to achieve better outcomes from a professional business perspective, to be a better leader. But it also may just be the most important thing that we do in our lives. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.